historically underserved communities. We know that most of these facilities are kind of, well, like geographically housed in Austin's historically underserved communities, and that those school communities have also been historically underserved by our school district. So it's about really working with those communities to center their voices as we develop these solutions for these facilities. And as far as engagement goes, for each of the sites, I'll talk a little bit more about what exactly this is going to look like later. But for each of the sites, we'll be doing both virtual and in-person meetings, sort of in two parts. The first part being predominantly about generating ideas and gathering ideas, while our consultants at Hyatt Brown are doing their thing that Jeremy's going to talk a little bit more about, their site analyses and all of that. We'll be thinking about what folks would like to see, and then once that first report from Hyatt Brown is out, we will reconvene and say, here's what's feasible, here's what y'all's ideas are, let's think about how we can marry those two things together before we make a final decision. We also have a digital engagement hub. This is brand new. This is going to be the first time we're using this new tool that we're very excited about. It is at publicinput.com/Austin ISD-repurposing. This is where our new survey will live, and any other digital engagement resources that occur over this process will be housed in there. And if you go there right now, you will see that there already is a brand new survey. And turning it back to Jeremy.
Great, thank you. And I think I want to make sure clear when I talk about the real estate analysis being in parallel with the community engagement, I want to share that the project team is part of both of those elements. They're not being run separately. So the project team will be involved with all the community engagement and equity discussions. And we have actually started our own kickoff for this by all taking place in the Equity by Design training to really make sure that we were grounding ourselves with the right priorities. So while there's community engagement going on behind the scenes at our desks, the project team is going to be doing some analysis, which really is fact gathering. And so it's looking at the current condition of the site, whether that's the building itself, the land. We're going to want to understand the history of the site, how that might impact the future. We're also going to look whether there's any, what it's currently slated is for zoning, and also what the city's future use of the site, what their vision is, right? So want to understand any regulations that would impact the site. And then again, looking at that equity component throughout. And so that then also involves gathering just market data, right, on what are the economics of the city of Austin, and specifically the neighborhoods, the communities where these sites are located, demographics, and then also the board has stated that affordable housing is a priority for us, and so we want to make sure we're gathering information around that as well. So once we've kind of gathered our facts, we've done our due diligence, and we have had the community engagement, those will all come together during this next part, which is our financial and economic analysis. As we hear the needs of the community, we're going to try to understand what is most suitable on that site. Is the land buildable? You know, if there's a desire for affordable housing, how much could we actually build on the site? What benefits the community can we actually bring? What public-private partnerships are available? What risks might we face with any of the needs that we're trying to answer? And so that leads into also some high-level land use planning where we start hypothetical programming and trying to look at, well, if we talk about building new facilities, how many can we fit on the site? And so the project team will help gather all that information. So we are really taking the needs and then finding out how do we make those a reality. And that leads into then the presentation of our findings. And that's where having heard the needs of the community, having then seen what's possible, what's feasible, we'll have a report with the findings and recommendations around what our options are, what financial value could it bring for the district, what community value can it bring, and then also, again, what are any risks involved? And I think Gabrielle highlighted in the beginning about what repurposing is and what it isn't. And when we talk about value, it's long-term value of the site. And it's not always just tied to pure dollars and cents. It's value in terms of what could we generate for the surrounding area in terms of value, financial value. And then that leads then into implementation. We'll have presented the findings not only to the community, but to the board. We'll have an opportunity to gather more feedback at that time. And that will help us narrow down our options, right? We will set our priorities, and those will all be populated into a request for proposal. And that is when we go to the market, and by market, just it could be a multitude of partners. So apologize for lack of a better word there, but we go out to the market to say, help make this a reality. Tell us what this looks like. If the example is affordable housing on a site, finding a partner who can build that affordable housing and tell us, how do we partner with them on it? What costs do they have? What costs might the district have? And how do we maintain this make it sustainable in the long run? And so we will make sure our priorities are identified in that RFP, and then we'll have a chance to review all those proposals, evaluate. District leadership will make recommendations to the Board of Trustees, and the trustees will ultimately vote publicly on who that partner will be, what the vision is for that site, and then start the process of physically redeveloping the site into whatever form that looks like.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. I've seen several questions pop up in the chat, so we're going to go ahead and jump straight into those. If my chat would open. There we go. So the first question I'm seeing here is from Charlie Lockwood. Could Austin ISD facilitate an email list sign up or some kind of contact sharing for interested community and nonprofit orgs to have dialogue and discuss potential partnerships? I like this question a lot because I'm really excited that Public Input, our new digital engagement platform, has a lot of those capabilities. If you were to log into it at this moment, you would see it in a pretty rudimentary format. It's really just the one survey right now, but we're really excited to be able to leverage this tool that's used by a lot of other public entities in the area to be able to do really collaborative digital engagement work. So yes, stay tuned for that. From Mildred Matthews, what does repurposing the alternative learning, I assume you mean alternative learning center, look like, and when will this all start? The when we will get to in just a moment. I think the point that I'd like to clarify here, and Jeremy, I invite you to join in, is that we don't necessarily intend to repurpose the alternative learning center itself. We are exploring options for that 20-acre property that would include keeping the alternative learning center exactly as it is, exactly where it is, and simply considering what can be done with the other substantial amount of land that property sits on.
Absolutely. That's the discussion that we're looking to have with the community, is how does alternative learning center fit into the future of the site? And one of the questions will be, is the current facility itself, is that the future home if they're to stay on the site? Or perhaps there's a vision where they have a different building facility for them. That there's a lot to be discussed there, and that's where we're looking for the community to help us think through that and combine that with the analysis itself.
The next question I'm seeing from TA Vasquez. What do you mean by community engagement? Can you break this down and what is the timeline? Y'all will see a really nice timeline graphic shortly, but I'll go ahead and break it down for you because I think there's going to be several questions about this. So we will be doing this process 3 facilities and then 2 and then 1. So starting in January, after we all return from what I hope will be a restful holiday break, we will start this process with Pease, Anita Coy, and Rosedale. So those are the 3 facilities we'll be starting with. Pease will have a slightly different process than Anita Coy and Rosedale, a slightly shorter process, because we will not be working with Hyatt Brown on that facility. We will not be doing all of the sort of feasibility analysis and all of that, because the state law requires that it maintains an educational purpose. So we will be exploring that specifically starting in January, hopefully with a decision by April, so that whatever we settle on with Pease, we can start that construction and finish it over the summer break. And by the 2022 to 23 school year, the new use of that facility would be up and running and ready to go. With Anita Coy and Rosedale, which we will also be starting in January. This process will be a little bit longer, a roughly 5-month long process. We will start with some virtual and some in-person engagement opportunities to do, like I mentioned before, some kind of idea generation, to kind of assess the needs in the community and think about some potential solutions that could address those needs, while Hyatt Brown is in tandem doing all of their analyses. And I think we plan to have all of that done around March or so, April maybe, sometime in that late March, early April range, at which point we would then reconvene and combine those two ideas together to, meaning the ideas that we came up with and the feasibility analysis from Hyatt Brown, and to develop a final recommendation with the community. So that's what the process will look like. That should be done by mid-May for Anita Coy and Rosedale. And then in July and maybe late July, we'll be starting with 2 more schools, which are at this point undecided. And then that process would be done around the end of the calendar year 2022, around December. And then in January of 2023, we would be starting with that final facility, which again remains undecided between Brooks, Metz, and Sims. We haven't decided exactly which order we'll do those 3 in.
And Gabrielle, if I could, one thing I just like to acknowledge, I keep saying the Alternative Learning Center, and in my mind, that encompasses everyone in that facility. So I do want to acknowledge that that includes the Library Media Center and our partners who are all there. And so that's all part of the discussion. It's all of those components discussing their current and future position on that site.
Thanks for that clarification. Next, we have a question from Jessica Wilson. How will you incorporate all of the community feedback that was already shared during the community surveys about school changes for Brook, Metz, Sims, and Pease in 2019? So there was a survey in the past. We will be taking the information from that survey and generating a report with it. The new survey will look a little bit different. And so then we will sort of merge those 2 before we actually start thinking about any specific final solution to anything. We will be merging that 2019 survey data with the new survey data. Somebody is unmuted.
Maria Hernandez.
All right. Next question. We have, so time has passed since these schools were closed. So the landscape and the people in the communities has changed 100%. Even in just 2 years, who will you be reaching out to in these areas? So we've started with a lot of the kind of at the highest level neighborhood associations and any community groups in the area that have organized specifically around the schools or around education issues. We've also started with reaching out to anybody who's already engaged in that process. So we were building a list of contacts throughout that time that we've been reaching out to and will continue to. And then of course, we'll be merging all of those contacts into this new platform, public input, and then taking the ones from there. And we'll be really working with a lot of our community leaders in those areas to reach the communities that used to, that went to the schools that used to be there. We're also working with the school communities at the schools that a lot of those students have transferred into now. So, you know, for Sims, for example, the vast majority of those students will now be at Norman Sims. So working with like the Norman Sims school community as well. Don't know if anybody else would like to add anything. Next question is from Joyce.
Actually, I did have a question on that. I'm sorry.
Sure.
In terms of that, in terms of who you're reaching out to, does that require some sort of opt-in? Because you're saying you're only, or you're predominantly reaching out to people that have already expressed engagement with education and the community. What about the people that actually live in the neighborhood?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It certainly does not require an opt-in. At this moment, since this is kind of the first public meeting related to the launch since we've actually defined a timeline for it, it has been largely people who have opted in or who already kind of exist as leaders in those communities. But going forward, a lot of that in-person outreach is going to be centered around, you know, going to the campuses or going to important locations in those school communities, such as churches, community centers, things like that, and doing that in person. We also will be able to send out mailers to the entire school community in the area. So hopefully, as we do that, we'll be able to reach more of the families that have not necessarily opted in or actively sought out the opportunities to engage about this. Thank you for that question.
And just to follow up on that, thank you for your answer. Is there some sort of platform or link for everybody to sort of provide their feedback if they do live in the neighborhood or have been affected by the closing of the schools?
Definitely. That is that publicinput.com/Austin ISD repurposing, which somebody can, if one of my colleagues can share that in the chat real quick, that would be great, because I'm backlogged in the chat with the questions.
Awesome.
I had a question.
Do we have somebody on mute?
Yes, I have a question.
Hi.
Could you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear.
What is the reason for cramming 3 schools into one school? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, you know, a lot of people in the area are not having children, or is it, like our newest attribute would be Metz Elementary. That'd be probably the newest school that was built. And I'm just not understanding why we're doing away with the schools. I'm just flabbergasted at the fact. I mean, I went to these schools as a child, and I can't possibly, you know, see these children not having a school and all cramming into one facility like at Sanchez. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
So I can address that, and thank you for that question. These schools were actually the 4 schools: Pease, Metz, Sims, and
those are low-income schools, correct?
They 3 of the 4 are in East Austin. Of course, Pease is in Central Austin, and they all have a variety of percent of low economic students. But
right. Like Johnston was. But do they have a rate of like failures or something for them to be doing this?
So when the schools were closed in 19, there were a variety of reasons why they were closed. And I think anyone who was involved in that process and the district can admit that that process was deeply flawed in how that went about. But the fact is that our enrollments now are even lower than they were at that point. And to consider putting resources to making these schools, again, would be taking resources away from other schools that are all deeply underfunded. I did want to clarify a question. We did not consolidate 3 schools into 1 school.
It was 2. Yeah, my understanding, I believe it was 2. Y'all took the third one out because y'all probably didn't have enough room.
Well, Metz consolidated into Sanchez, into their new school. Sims consolidated into Norman, into their new school. And Brook was split into 2, one into Go Valley, or a portion of it, the portion that's north of the river, into Go Valley, and a portion that's south of the river into Linder. And then because Pease does not have an attendance area, it's an all transfer school. When it closed, those students went back to their assigned schools or requested another transfer to a different school.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that question. So moving on to some of the questions from the chat. I'm seeing a question from Summer Lee. How much say will the neighborhoods and the community actually have in the decision-making process? This is an excellent question. As I said at the top of the meeting, our goal is really to co-create these solutions with the communities that are affected by it. As a community engagement coordinator, I kind of consider my role in all of this to just be sort of like a sponge for absorbing the information that I hear from the community and then distilling it into concrete points that we can share with somebody else. It's not about rephrasing anything that anybody says. It's not about imposing ideas that, you know, I have or that other district staff have or that our administration has. It's really about just being a bridge to transfer information from the people for whom these changes would matter the most, the people who would be impacted the most by these changes, and then consolidating them all into one place. So the goal
I had one more thing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. As far as the teacher housing goes at Allen, I believe, or Brook, is that still on?
At the moment, everything essentially is a possibility.
Yes, ma'am.
And as we go a little bit farther into the process for each of the facilities, we'll be able to explore what's a possibility in terms of, you know, what can the site actually support and what ideas are sort of the most salient and the most impactful for the communities as determined by those communities.
I just thought that was a great idea by whoever, you know, threw that out there, was making that a possibility for the teachers. Because I mean, we all know they're well underpaid, so to speak. So, you know, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. And there have been in the past, back in 2019, there were several ideas that were proposed at the time for possible solutions. And those proposed solutions, they're incorporated into the survey we have right now. So if you go to that link that I've mentioned several times, you'll see what some of those solutions that have been proposed in the past were, and you can vote on how favorable you think those things are. And we're also perfectly open to entertaining completely new options that haven't been considered or proposed before, if that's something that is really responsive to the needs of that specific school community.
Right.
So, next question. Oh, this I think is more of a comment. The historic review, oh yes, this is a question. The historic review, will that include a determination by the city or state as to whether the property is eligible for historic designation? Please note that buildings constructed in the 50s are often eligible if they are not dramatically altered. This sounds like a Jeremy question.
Yes, thank you. So the historic review throughout the process will all be internal, for lack of a better way to frame it. We will not go to the city yet because the way they have their process is we need to apply with our partner on whoever's eventually going to repurpose the site. And so until we have that identified, we cannot first go to the city and ask them to make a determination on historical significance. However, we are doing all the research we can and certainly can have conversations with the historic preservation to get a temperature read, but we will not have any firm decision as part of the findings. That will come after we move forward.
Thanks,
In the
Charlie.
implementation phase. Sorry.
No, you're good. Thank you. Question from Charles York. Will you simultaneously be performing a highest and best use analysis as a comparison point? Yes. So this is what Hyatt Brown will be doing that I have just referred to in not those exact terms several times throughout this presentation. But yes, a highest and best use analysis is what our consultants will be doing. A question from Angela Pires. This is a really good question. Is there going to be a reckoning about the inequity in the school closures choices? It seems to be necessary so that the community can trust AISD again. I don't know, Beth, would you like to take this question?
I guess I'm not understanding the question, Gabriella. If you could help me. I mean, absolutely.
I can help you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Since the majority of schools consider for closing, and as far as I know, still being considered for closure, they were pretty much all in the east side of Austin. When at the vote to close in the schools, the equity officer called that this is what racial look on the 21st century. And so it seems now a lot of talking about engaging community. ASD pretty much destroyed some communities. So now we want to engage community. Jeremy, sorry, but I heard you talking about equity like every other word that you said. And reality is that the process that led to the school closures, I don't think that took equity seriously. And people are still living with the consequence of that. And so far, I haven't seen any reckoning of that. So when you come with all this beautiful talk about engaging community, and first of all, which community? Because some of them were displaced. If you go to drive by Brook Elementary, you understand why Brook Elementary, why it was closed. It's all fancy lofts and all. You know, it's good to close that, and soon you're going to have a really nice new school sparkling for all your white kids. So is there going to be a reckoning about that from the district before you talk about the engaging community? That's what I meant.
Okay. And I'm trying to speak from my heart. We recognize that the process which ended up closing Brook, Metz, Sims, and Pease was not our finest work as a district. It was deeply flawed, and it was not equitable. But knowing now that those schools are closed, we would like an opportunity to work with the community. And when I say community, I mean not just those people who now live around the school, but past school communities, former school communities. and the rest of the district to try to best use these sites in service of those communities. And we know that trust is earned. And we understand that there is a lot of distrust. And so we would like to know how best to engage and how best to understand and to listen and to come up with solutions that are good for both the community, the school community, and the district as a whole. I know it's not something that's going to happen overnight. We recognize that.
It's just that there were so many conversations with communities, and what those communities said is, we do not want school closures. And the district voted to close schools. I cannot imagine anything coming out of that without reckoning that, but taking action with that. There has been a request since before that vote for equity audit of the whole district. You know what? No, never happened. I mean, from outside, right? You want a third party.
Yeah.
Never happened. So, I mean, for me, everything after this now, it's hard for me to believe or to really want to engage with this district in a way that I feel that I can trust the district.
So I really want to thank you for that commentary, Angela, because I think it's something that I know for a fact that I try to always keep in the back of my mind as I do any work as a community engagement coordinator for the district, but especially around this kind of work. To your point about, I want to clarify one thing, to your point about the third-party equity assessment, that is actually something that is underway. It has been a really long process, but I believe at the end of October, the Equity Office put out a request for proposals for a third-party group to do that. And I think the hope is to have them onboarded by April and to start doing that. So I know that's significantly delayed, but it is underway. And, you know, we also, the way that we're looking at this process now is that, you know, we really don't want to go through what we went through with the school changes process, but we also want to acknowledge the damage that has been done by it. So all I can really speak for myself is that my hope is that with this process, we can model a better version of what engaging with the school district can look like. And my best hope is really that if we've done the work right and we've used, you know, equity by design and all these other equitable practices, principles that we're always saying that are informing our work. My hope is that if they really are informing our work, you'll all be able to see it. And my best hope, all I can really ask and implore this group of people and everybody else to do is to give us, you know, 1% hope and faith and continue engaging in this process in the hope that we can demonstrate better.
I appreciate y'all's response, and I really hope that you keep that in mind as you move forward, and that doesn't fall through the cracks again. But
Definitely.
I appreciate the answers.
I also would invite everybody to please not be apologetic at all in pointing out if it is starting to fall through the cracks or if it was never there in the first place. If like the first meeting you go to for this, when we start doing those actual feedback sessions in January, is not being practiced in the way it should be practiced, please, we need to know that, and we really want to know that. In the interest of trying to get through some more questions, I've been scrolling through the chat and I'm going to try to condense some of the themes into you know, a few questions that hopefully encompass some of the themes. I've seen some comments in here about, can we talk about some of the specific schools and things like that? The purpose of tonight's meeting is largely just to update, it's sort of like a launch, like a public launch. It's just to update everybody and say, we're starting this process. This is what it's going to look like. This is what the timeline is for each facility. And in due time, we will be able to have these really good, robust, specific conversations about each of the facilities. Some of the other questions have, I've seen a lot of questions about affordable housing, about people saying that, you know, it seems like affordable housing is already decided, or what is exactly would affordable housing look like. I want to make one thing very clear: nothing is already decided. There were some ideas that were suggested 2 years ago for what these facilities might have been done, and our city and our school district, and frankly, our world, have changed pretty substantially in those 2 years. And while some of those suggestions in the past will guide some of the conversations that we have and will be, you know, always on the table, those options are still on the table. They are by no means the only option. And there's a lot of different ways that those options, like affordable housing or workforce housing, that have been suggested before, there's a lot of different ways that those might look in practice. And that's what we hope to understand when we go through the 5-month engagement process that I mentioned before that we're going to be doing for each of these facilities. I've seen some questions about the surveys from November 2019. Those results have been compiled into a report that I am very, very sorry to say has kind of dropped the ball in being shared, but we will happily get that shared within the next few days on our website at austinisd.org/repurposing, as well as a kind of backup document on that public input website that we've shared before as well. And there's a really good question here that I saw from Abby Burnham. Do we have data that tracked the students from these closed campuses to see how many might have left the district altogether, either to schools outside of Austin ISD or to charters? And how are we going to avoid more loss to charters and prevent further Eastside campuses from closing? And I think this is something that's really kind of at the core of a lot of what happened up until 2019. And like I mentioned, some of those district-wide problems that we hope to solve with the repurposing process now. So I'll invite either Jeremy or Beth to answer that question.
Sure. So as far as tracking students, we certainly can track students that have remained in the district. So we can find those students. We can know, we can't know the reason if a student left the district to another district. You know, was it in response to the school closure, or was it in response to another event in the family? But we can track students that have left for another Texas district. Once they leave the bounds of Texas, I can't track them. And I cannot track them if they go to a private school or a charter school. I can know there's certain information that is protected, just like you would not want the school district to give address of your child to another entity. The public charter school is not going to give us the address of their students as well. So we can know some information about students, but we can't know granular information about students, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Beth. I want to make sure we got to, I think there was like 3 parts to that question, and I want to make sure we got all of it. There's one part here that's, if we are projected to continue to drop in enrollment, how are we going to avoid more loss of students to charter schools or, you know, other schools? other school districts, that is, and prevent further East Side campuses from closing.
I'm sorry, Gabriella, I was distracted by the chat. I need to put that away. Was the question, how do we ensure that we don't lose more students out
Yes,
to charters
yes, and specifically East Side students.
and East Side students? Right. You know, part of what we think is going on there, you know, there's two reasons why we know students are student enrollment is declining in East Austin and in other areas of Austin. One is cost of housing, and that is, you know, a reality that many of us struggle with, is being able to afford where we live. And so we do see, as our enrollment declines in the district, we do see adjacent school districts numbers increasing, right? So there's a fairly easy assumption there about students' families moving farther out from the center of the city because of expense. So that's one thing that's happening. The other thing that is happening is, you know, to charters. And we have hired this year, we now have a chief of enrollment. And I'm sorry, I probably got his title wrong. Alejandro Delgado is his name. He's in charge of trying to understand the complexities of why people choose AISD and why they choose other schools, be it charter or private school, or leaving the district, and what we can do to combat that. So there is a whole district office now that is looking at just those issues.
Great.
And this is, if I could add, this is Jeremy again, Director of Real Estate for the school district. And with the opportunity we have here with repurposing is 4 sites on the east side that can be leveraged to address the needs of those students and families on the east side. What that looks like is what this process is going to yield. I know this is probably the toughest meeting of all of them because we don't have that answer for you yet. And I think, though, that hopefully speaks to the fact that nothing has been prescribed. We have mentioned the idea of affordable housing, as that's been a priority identified by the board. But again, we don't have an end result in mind yet for this. This is what the whole process is guided for. Otherwise, we wouldn't go through 5 months of community engagement and analysis to come to an answer that we already had decided on. So we have to think creatively around, though, what these sites can mean for us. Is it, are they assets in terms of serving needs? Is it value that puts money back into the district? At the end of the day, the main focus is that they're long-term, they're sustainable, and that the district maintains control so we can make sure that we are not impacting the students negatively by leaving these sites completely.
Great. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but there's also a couple more questions that I really want to get to. So for those of you on the call who kind of have a hard stop at 7, who need to leave, I'm going to cover a couple things about timeline and next steps really quickly. And then there's a couple questions that I've seen that actually center a lot around the consultants and what folks would like to see from the consultants and what more information people would like to know about them. And I think I'd really like to turn it over to our consultants after that to tell folks a little bit about themselves. But really quickly, about that timeline, like I mentioned, just in case it got lost in what I was saying, here's a visualization. We're starting this process right now, and we can expect a roughly 5-month timeline for each of the facilities. For the first 3 schools, facilities, Pease, Anita Coy, and Rosedale, that process will begin with virtual and in-person engagement in January after the break through roughly mid-May, at which point we would hopefully have a final recommendation. The next two schools, which are at this point undefined, would start in July and finish around the end of November. And then the final school, which also remains undefined or undecided rather at this point, would start in January.
And if I could, sorry, if I could clarify on the timeline, what we're showing here is the 5 months where the project team is getting to those findings. The implementation process, we can't define that yet because we don't know what the answer is going to be for those sites, what the district ultimately and the trustees will vote in terms of what we're going to do with each site. And so that, you know, in terms of redeveloping, repurposing, et cetera, that could be months, could be longer. So I just want to make that clear that, you know, when we say May, we're not going to have something suddenly breaking ground or, you know, have an answer of have this ready to go with a ribbon cutting by May. You know, this is going to take a while, but at least we will, by the end of the 5 months, have a direction.
Yes, yeah, and thank you for that clarification, and a clarification for your clarification, except for Pease. We actually do intend to, the hope is, if all kind of goes according to plan, the hope with Pease would be that around May or June, well, around June, I suppose, in the summer is when we would be breaking ground on something new.
And perhaps since we're, it's been a while since you first introduced it, we could just reiterate for people, Pease is guided that it has to be used for educational purposes. So thus it follows a different path to get to a decision, but is also much more narrow in scope of what the use can be.
Yeah, definitely. So that process won't look exactly the same. And it won't also necessarily be anything that is a construction. We might be preserving that building in its entirety and simply deciding what kind of programming would be offered at it and what modifications or accommodations might need to be made to be able to support that kind of programming. And for next steps, survey is up, digital engagement hub, publicinput.com/Austin ISD-repurposing. This is going to be also a place for lots of resources and an ability to comment and kind of chat with other folks who are involved in this process. And the most immediate term engagement that's going to be happening is going to be the both virtual and in-person feedback sessions, or input sessions rather, for Anita Coy and Rosedale and Pease, which will be starting in January 2022. And as I promised, before we call it a day, I'd really like to let our consultants, to let Jay Brown from Hyatt Brown talk a little bit about Hyatt Brown, since I'm seeing a lot of interest in the chat about kind of revolving around learning a little bit more about Hyatt Brown.
Sure. Thank you. So Hyatt Brown is a African-American woman-owned engineering and real estate consulting firm that specializes in assisting public sector entities and mission-oriented institutions in evaluating and then ultimately implementing complicated real estate related development projects that are intended to accomplish public and mission-oriented goals while at the same time being feasible from a market and a commercial standpoint. So we've put together, and I am the chairman and the managing director of that organization. So we're delighted to work with the district and the community on evaluating options for what to do with these properties. And that's really what we specialize in. And we do that. I've been doing it myself for 25 years, and the company is 10 years old, and we've been doing it for quite some time. The Hyatt Brown team, though, is also made up of other subject matter experts that are needed to really appropriately evaluate these options and to present clearly and transparently, what the trade-offs are for what to do with these sites. So I believe, I can't see everyone on the call, but we have zoning and regulatory experts from the Drenner Group who are also on our team. I think I saw Anaya and Nikki, and if you're on, if you can wave so people can hear your face, they will be providing zoning and regulatory support to our team. We also need, there's Anaya, thank you, sir. We also need expertise in architect and engineering to really help us evaluate the physical aspects of the site and what's possible based on what the site and the facilities and the buildings on the site can accommodate, and how that can support what the community and the district ultimately wants to do. So we have Paige, who's an architect and engineering firm, on, and I believe we had Ryan on from Paige. Ryan, are you still on? If so, can you wave? Okay, maybe he's not. I can't see all the pictures. He is. Okay, thank you, Ryan. In addition to that, stakeholder involvement and communication and integrating that into our real estate analysis is what this entire process is really all about. So we have our other teaming partners from Odessa Communications. Sharonda was on earlier. Carmela is on as well. If you guys can raise your hands. And all the folks that are on here are the people you will see in all of these community conversations and in all of the work that we're going to be doing and presenting. Affordable housing has been mentioned. And so we also have an affordable housing expert on our team, and that's the Affordable Housing Advisory Group. As Jeremy said, nothing's been decided about what's going to go on these sites, but we need to make sure we have all the right expertise to evaluate the options. And then I mentioned earlier, Jennifer Boss, who's also with Hyatt Brown. Jennifer, if you could raise your hand and wave as well, will be our project manager. So we are excited about the opportunity to help you. I appreciate this conversation so much because we're already getting a feel for what we need to be thinking about, and our job is to give the district, the community, and all the other stakeholders the objective analysis and facts about what we can do based on all the input from you all from a real estate standpoint. And happy to answer any other specific questions about Hyatt Brown.
Thanks so much, Jay. And thanks to everybody who has stayed on for a little bit of extra time, and in general to everybody for sharing time with us tonight. I know that a lot of you might be leaving with more questions than you came in with, or at the very least leaving with the same amount of questions that you came in with. In our finite amount of time, I know we were only able to answer so much. I'm sharing my contact information in the chat. Like I said at the top, I'm Gabriella. I'm a community engagement coordinator, and you can feel free to reach out to me anytime with any of these questions. You can also feel free to share them. I believe there's a function where you can just kind of write a question as a comment on public input. We will be regularly monitoring that Engagement Hub website and engaging with folks through there. But my line is always open. If you want to call my literal line, I can share my phone number as well. Yes, the chat will be saved and shared. Yes, this meeting is going to be recorded and posted hopefully tomorrow. If there's any technical obstructions, then Friday at the absolute latest on our website. And you can feel free to check out austinisd.org/repurposing. We recently did a pretty substantial update to the website that shares a lot more information about these specific facilities. And just stay tuned there, and stay tuned at publicinput.com/austinisd-repurposing. And will you post answers to the unanswered questions from the chat? I'm still exploring the possibilities of public input, but I believe the answer to that is yes. And if the answer is no, then I will just be responding to folks directly. You all had to register for this meeting, which means I have all your emails. And so if there are questions that were not answered, we will be able to get you those answers in either email or.
So Angela kind of chimed in, so I'm just going to jump in. Yeah, I wish you would acknowledge how this discussion, the way it's happening, how it's founded on inequity. I sat here and listened to y'all talk about how these these discussions, these decisions are going to be centered on equity, but here I am. I had to register for this meeting. I had to have a smartphone for this meeting. I had to have internet access for this meeting. I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? Because the people that the district is losing, the people that are being driven out of this city, are the people who don't have smartphones, who don't have access to internet. Why do you think last year the district had to have big yellow school buses that were basically giant routers? So why don't we start there? I mean, there are so many missteps tonight, but that's got to be one of the biggest ones.
Thank you for that. We obviously have observed very, very much over the past year and a half, however long it's been since March 2020, what happens when the district relies too heavily on technology and on technology access. And what I can commit to, and definitely will commit to, is that there will be many in-person opportunities for engagement throughout the process that will be hosted, you know, at community centers, churches, the campuses themselves. There will be mailers and mass phone communications sent out to help promote those. So folks who don't have access to the internet or to technology are not going to be left out of the process. What we have tonight at this moment is just what we've done digitally, but I can definitely promise that we're trying to improve, and we will improve. We are committing to improve, and your feedback about our engagement efforts as well is also really, really important, because that helps us know what types of communications and what types of outreach are most valuable to the communities. So with that, I think that's it for tonight. So as I mentioned, questions that didn't get answered, we'll be making an FAQ and posting it on the website. We also have our digital engagement hub, which hopefully will offer the opportunity, as I explore its capabilities some more, for you to engage with us. And I'd like to wish everybody a good night. And I'm really looking forward to this process, to working with you and with the school communities to think about some solutions that can really help turn the situation around a little bit, and help hopefully help demonstrate good faith from the district going forward, rather than perhaps what has been demonstrated in the past. Beth or Jeremy, any final messages?
No, I just, again, want to thank everyone for spending some time with us this evening. We appreciate you, and look forward to working together on this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. You know, again, our process here is to be aligned with the mission of serving our students and families. I know this is a broad level meeting of, you know, trying to give you just a high level summary of where we're going. And once we get down to this, the individual sites with the community engagement meetings, as Gabrielle said, I think it'll be hopefully a robust conversation, and we're looking forward to starting to get into that next.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.